Welcome to this episode of Moments in Credit Union History, sponsored by CUNA Mutual. It's my pleasure today to welcome to the show Rosie Holub. Rosie is what I consider a Renaissance master of the credit union world, having served in the Wyoming League, a trip to Alaska to serve there, as well as New Mexico and Missouri. She's also the very first woman to serve as the MICUH chairman. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much.
I feel like you probably have quite a few frequent flyer miles from all of your travels.
Oh, absolutely. On several airlines.
So welcome to the show for today. I know that we're going to cover sort of the broad overview of your career and how working in different leagues and working at different levels of the credit union movement have been, both challenging and rewarding to you. So take it away.
Well, how did you get into this credit union community is a very interesting tale on its own. I was a teacher in Colorado, and my family moved to Wyoming. There weren't any teaching jobs in colleges available up there. And there was an ad in a paper that was looking for an education director for a league. Now, it didn't specifically address credit union. It would just said a league. And I thought, well, let's go in an interview. And so I did. And I found out it was a credit union league. I'd asked the CEO, what do you want this position to do? And he wasn't sure. He said, every other state league has one, and we need to, have one too. I thought, well, how can I fail at that? I can pretty much use my background and I'll see what I can do. So I took the job, and it was the beginning of a very eventful journey because I became education director, from education director to compliance, along with education director, some accounting support, some consulting, traveling around the state of Wyoming. The president of the league had a heart attack and was unable to serve anymore. And the credit union solicited me to take the job of league president. Now, I had only been education director and in their operations for about a year. So it was a rather daunting task, to say the least. I had no idea what do the league presidents do. But I took the job because the credit unions had faith in me. And I thought it was, I had a social and personal responsibility to make a meaningful contribution if I can. And that was the beginning of many challenges, because my first MICUH meeting, the Association of Credit Union Leagues, I was the only woman there. And so that was interesting, because that was the first time they had to deal with a woman in their presence, and I'm sure that their language had changed. And it was interesting to see how they responded to the change of their complexion of their group. But I had many mentors. And I have to say, Gene Farley, Dave Chatfield, Bob Hood, Dick Insweiler were wonderful. Gary Walter, welcoming not only me into MICUH, but placing me on committees that were meaningful. I know that I was somehow or other put on the system planning committee, which at that time was very high level, looking at the future of the credit unions. And R.C. Morgan was involved in that as well, and they just pushed me into places I was very uncomfortable. Leagues were very different then, because every league was, had their own service corporation, they had their league, and they had their own corporates at that time. We were a very small league in Wyoming, but we had a service corporation and a corporate, and we were mainly serving, as credit unions were in a whole, select employee groups. So they had many employer-based credit unions, and usually the person who managed the credit union was a volunteer or a employee of the company that did so on a part-time basis. The majority of them were women. It was much easier at that particular juncture to be able to get the unity, because we all were there for a common purpose. And the roles and products and services were very clearly defined, because initially we were just getting into share drafts at the time I entered the community. And So it was very, very organized. We hadn't imploded yet, as I call it, into all these other morphing into other types of structures. So that was the beginning. Worked there for 6 years and was recruited to go to Alaska. And in Alaska, I started with Alaskan Federal Credit Union doing marketing and vice president of human resources. There I got to be a teller. I had to do all sorts of operational things. And for the first time, really saw the credit union movement from a totally different perspective. I had, primarily been education director, compliance, all that, but from an operational perspective, to see how they viewed leagues, to see how they viewed the movement, especially in Alaska, which is so far removed from the lower 48, it was interesting how different it was. So I went from Alaskan and was recruited by Alaska USA, which is one of the largest credit unions in the country, very independent, very self-sufficient. Much resource to do all the products and services themselves. The leagues at that juncture in Alaska was all of a sudden, oh my word, the league was really at the beck and call of a credit union, not looked to as a resource for the credit union, but more as a collaborator to bring the rest of the credit unions together to form partnerships, to do advocacy, and to help bring some unity into the small credit union community in Alaska. So it was very interesting. And for that, I worked with Dave Chatfield, Bill Eckhart, all who were great mentors for me. And they, at that point, decided in Alaska that they were going to be leaders in the technical aspects. I mean, ATM, they had their own ATM network. I mean, things that the lower 48 hadn't developed yet as far as the credit union community as an integral part. So it was very, very great place to be, great time to be there. But I remarried, and my husband, we moved to New Mexico. So New Mexico, I thought, well, I don't know if I want to get involved in credit unions, but here is to show you, never plan your career because it just doesn't work that way. There was a CEO in New Mexico by the name of Dave Seeley. Dave Seeley was an NCUA examiner in the state of Wyoming. And he knew I was in town. And he said, if you could help me with the project, I'm going to start a call center and I want to get this member services up, and we're having IRA administration now, and we'd like to get all this going. And it was a large credit union, military credit union, Kirtland Federal Credit Union. So I went to work for him. I was just going to do a project. That didn't work out very well. Next thing you know, I was very involved in the credit union, was their senior VP. And I started and implemented a credit union call center. At that point in time, I was asked by CUNA to contribute and write a book on implementing call centers, which I did, which was one of CUNA's bestsellers in 1999. But as luck will have it, and fate, the New Mexico Credit Union League had a vacancy as their CEO, and they recruited me to do that. And Dave said, we need you, but they need you more. So I took that job. And at that time, we decided, credit unions were consolidating. You saw the changes, the morphs in the movement then, where you had consolidation. Credit unions, you had expanded fields of membership, you had state and federal charters, you had competition among credit unions, diversity of products and services, but a limited powers, lots of banker attacks. Everything was very, very different than it was initially, and more complex. Much different relationships among credit unions, among the leagues, among CUNA, all of that. And so what happened is we found that there's a threshold of pain for league dues. So we decided to be innovative and took the call center idea and started a national conference. And so that we could get those dollars and filter them through the service corporations and help the credit unions keep their dues down and be able to support the league, and the league to be able to keep the advocacy and products and services and be able to expand. So that was kind of an innovative way to handle things there. Well, New Mexico was a great experience. Then was recruited to Missouri. Now, Missouri, went to the Missouri Credit Union League, credit union system at the time, which had an enormous national presence. It was one of the largest leagues in the country. Bob Hood used to be their CEO, was a very wonderful mentor of mine, by the way. And all of a sudden, I'm thrown into a business model that was truly amazing. I had resources for the first time. I felt like a little girl in a candy store. I had all the people and the talent and the ability to create and have us really be responsive to credit unions and be able to put together quality controls and things that I always dreamed about being able to do, but you just didn't have the resource to do all those things. So that was a very interesting avenue to be involved nationally, because at the time when I joined Missouri, all of a sudden, next thing you know, I'm on the Renaissance Committee and the Renewal Project, and in ACUL, and working my way up through the ACUL leadership. And as I looked at how leagues had changed and how the issues that leagues were dealing with in 99 through like 2010, amazing, the changes in the level of complexion in how credit unions, leagues, CUNA were all relating, and how are we going to keep this movement together. The economy was affecting us. The changes in large credit unions and them wanting to be the drivers, so to speak, of the movement, which is great. Not that that's bad, but the role of leagues was changing to be the advocacy center. Credit unions now had the ability, the financing, resource to be able to do their own products and services. They were the innovators. Leagues were partnering with them as a marketing arm. We would be partnering with leagues. All of a sudden you had regional leagues. You had leagues partnering with other leagues, which was great. In Missouri, we partnered with the Illinois League for our item processing, which we served the nation as well as Illinois and Missouri. And so we had huge item processing center. We partnered with them. They had strength in so many areas. We partnered with them. We were their marketing arm. They were our marketing arm. And we had a lot of regional corporates coming together. I was fortunate enough to be on the board of US Central at the time when they were having all these consolidations. And the consolidations, although it was viewed often as more of a negativity, like why can't they be on their own, efficiencies and economies of scale and competition drove that, and that was fine. Actually absorbing the smaller credit unions and having them members, because that's really where we're at. Members have access to the sophistication of services. It was fabulous. But the most important thing in my years at Missouri and in ACUL leadership was being able to be part of the DC Credit Union House. That was the first time in the presence in Washington, D.C. of credit unions that was not only a physical location, it was a center, a host for legislative leaders, congressional delegates, states to come together to meet and to be able to have a physical presence in DC that shows we're not going away. Yes, we've had our difficulties. It became even more important on the advocacy side to show a presence because we were still getting bankers' attacks, as many of the other people you've interviewed have certainly documented. But we've also had not only those bankers attacks and things of that nature, we also needed to show that we are something to be reckoned with, and that we do represent consumers. We were the consumer advocates, and we wanted to be looked at as a resource for congressmen to ask, okay, here's this bill. What is its effect on credit union members, on constituents, and the consumer as a whole? That's where we put ourselves. We're the consumer advocates. What a wonderful place to be, because everybody else is self-centered, profit-driven. We are the cooperative of choice, and that Credit Union House really brought that to light. Missouri was the first state to replicate that. We put ours in our capital, Jefferson City, and a couple blocks from the capital. And I'm telling you, the bankers went nuts because all of a sudden we became, they were aware of us. Not only the bankers were always aware of us, but the legislators as a whole. And when your legislature realizes, hey, you're representing consumers and you're this big, and this is how many members you have, and many of them are my constituents. So it's great. It was just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be able to be part of the industry.
It's a fabulous story. It's an exhausting journey, but I think that when you talk about at the very beginning that don't make plans that can't be changed. You certainly have touched all areas of the movement through your long career, and thanks for answering that ad. Things could have been completely different. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes,
That's certainly inspiring to anybody who's just starting out in the movement these days, that your career path can be what you want it to be. So thank you for sharing with us.
Absolutely. Don't plan it out. Just look for the opportunities and accept them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. This has been another episode of Moments in Credit Union History, sponsored by MICUH.